You're sitting around the kitchen table with your siblings, and someone finally says it out loud. So, what are we going to do with mom's house? And just like that, a conversation that's already heavy with grief turns into one of the most complicated financial decisions your family has ever faced. Keep it, rent it, sell it. Everyone has an opinion, nobody agrees. And underneath all of it is this quiet fear that whatever you decide, you might be making a very expensive mistake. I've sat at the table with a lot of families, and what I can tell you is this: there is no one size fits all answer, but there is a right way to think through it. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a real framework for making this decision, one that actually fits your family situation, not just a generic checklist you found online. Stay with me because there are a few things about this decision that most people don't find out until after they've already. Some of them are costly. Before we get into the three options, I want to make sure you're starting from the same place, because the decision of what to do with an inherited home is almost never purely financial. It's emotional, it's rational, and it's tied to a time in your life when you are already stretched thin. So, the first thing I want you to give yourself permission to do is slow down. You do not have to decide this week. In most situations, you have more time than you think. And a rushed decision made from grief or family pressure is one of the most common regrets I see. That said, there are some situations where time is a real factor. If the estate is in probate, if there's a reverse mortgage on the property, if taxes are coming due, or if the home is sitting vacant and starting to accumulate costs. If any of those apply to you, that's something to address quickly. Talk to the state attorney so you know what your actual timeline is. Now let's walk through each option honestly. Option one is keeping the home, either as a primary residence for one of the heirs or as a family property that everyone holds on to together. This sounds simple, but it rarely is. If one person wants to keep the home, they typically need to buy out the other heirs. That means either refinancing the property into their own name, bringing in outside cash, or negotiating some kind of payment arrangement with the family. That's a real transaction, and it needs to be handled properly through the estate with guidance from your attorney and potentially a CPA, because there are tax implications depending on how the buyout is structured. If the family decides to hold the property together without any buyout, and this happens more than you'd think, you are now co-owners. That means you share all the costs: property taxes, insurance, maintenance, any repairs. And more importantly, you share all the decisions, every decision. And if one person stops contributing or wants out later, that can get messy fast. There's something called a partition action in California where a co owner can actually force a sale through the courts if the other owners won't agree. It doesn't happen often, and it's painful. So, if you're going to hold property jointly, please get a simple co ownership agreement in place. Your estate attorney can help with that. There's also an emotional piece to keeping the home that's worth naming. Some families hold on to a property not because it makes financial sense, but because letting go of the house feels like letting go of the person. And that's a real valid feeling. I just want you to be honest with yourself about which part is driving the decision, because they require very different conversations. Option two is renting the home. On paper, this can look really attractive. Ongoing income, you keep the asset, you don't have to make a permanent decision right now. But rental properties require active management. The home has to be in rentable condition, which means any deferred maintenance, outdated systems, or cosmetic issues need to be addressed before you can put a tenant in. If the home has been lived in by an elderly parent for 30 years, there's a good chance it needs work. And that work costs money up front before you see a single dollar in rental income. You'll also need to think about property management. Are you going to self manage? That means tenant screening, lease agreements, maintenance costs, late rent, and potentially evictions. Or are you going to hire a property manager, which typically runs 8 to 10% of the monthly rent, sometimes more? That comes right off the top. And here's the piece most people overlook. If the home is in probate or held in a trust that hasn't been fully distributed yet, you may have legal restrictions on renting it until the estate is settled. Again, your attorney needs to be part of this conversation before you put a for rent sign in the window. There's also the capital gains angle. If you hold the property and rent it for several years, you may lose some of the tax protection you have right now at the time of inheritance. That's something your CPA needs to walk you through specifically for your situation. I'm not a tax advisor, but I'll tell you, it's one of the most frequently overlooked pieces of this decision. Option 3 is selling the home. And before I even get into the logistics, I want to say something. Selling is not giving up. Selling is not dishonoring your parent. Selling is often the most practical, loving, and financially sound decisions a family can make, especially when grief is already heavy and the last thing anyone needs is an ongoing responsibility tied to that loss. When you sell an inherited property, you typically benefit from something called the stepped up cost basis. This means that for capital gains purposes, the value of the home is reset to what it was worth on the date of death, not what your parent originally paid for it 40 years ago. For many families in Orange County, that difference is enormous. It can mean little to no capital gains tax on the sale, even if the home has appreciated significantly. But, and this is important, the step up basis only protects you if you sell within a reasonable window. The longer you wait, the more any additional appreciation becomes taxable. Before you can sell, the home also needs to be cleared out and prepared. For most inherited property, that's a real project. You're looking at personal belongings accumulated over decades: furniture, collectibles, paperwork, clothing, tools, sentimental items. Getting through all that before a sale is genuinely overwhelming, and it's something families often underestimate. This is actually where I spend a lot of my time working with families, not just the real estate transaction itself, but coordinating the people and services that needed to get the home ready. Cleanout crews who handle full estate clearouts with care and efficiency. Personal property specialists who can identify items of real value, antiques, jewelry, artwork, before anything gets donated or discarded. Estate liquidators for families who want to convert household contents into cash rather than donate everything. Organizers who help prioritize when all feels like too much. Contractors for repairs, interior updates, even exterior work when curb appeal matters. Spot and odor treatment when a home has been closed up or has pet history. And senior transition support for situations where a living parent is also moving at the same time. I coordinate all of that for the families I work with so they don't have to track down 5 different vendors at the worst possible time in their lives. That's part of my work I'm most proud of, because getting the home ready is often harder than the sale itself. Because I've been talking to you as an educator and a guide, which is generally how I think about my work, I want to remind you I am also a licensed realtor in California, and I specialize specifically in inherited probate trust and estate properties. I mention that not to sell you anything, but because context matters. And when I talk about preparing a home for sale, coordinating vendors, understanding timelines, or navigating the nuances of probate, I'm not speaking theoretically. I do this frequently with real families in Orange County. I work with probate attorneys, estate planning attorneys, and CPAs. I'm not here to replace them. Attorneys handle the legal side. I handle the real life side, the stuff that happens between court dates and the closing. So, how do you actually make this decision? Here's the framework. Here's the framework I use with every family. Start with the legal reality. What does the state document say? Is there a will, a trust? Is the property in probate? You cannot plan around what you don't know. Get that clarity first and let the state attorney lead you. Leave that conversation. Then look at the financial picture. What's the home worth today? What does it cost to carry? Taxes, insurance, utilities, any loans. That would take it. What would it take to get it rentable or sellable? And what are the tax implications of each path? Your CPA is the right person for that last piece. And then, and only then, look at the family dynamics. Who wants what and why? Is there one heir who generally wants to live there and can afford to buy the others out? Is there consensus, or is someone being pressured? Is the desire to keep the home driven by love, fear, or letting go? Financial need or genuine investment strategy? All of those are valid, but they lead to very different answers. And finally, look at your own bandwidth. Managing an inherited property through grief while potentially also managing your own job and family is a lot. There's no shame in choosing the path that will let your family heal and move forward. If you're in the middle of this right now, I want you to know it doesn't have to be as complicated as it feels at the kitchen table. With the right guidance, most families find a path through this that they feel generally good about. If you're in Orange County and want to talk through your situation, no pressure, no sales pitch, there's a link in the description where you can reach out directly. I offer complimentary consultations for inherited property situations. And if this video was helpful, please share it with someone who's in the middle of this decision right now. It might be exactly what they need to hear.